Dr. Anjali Bhatt is a practicing consultant endocrinologist at Pune, and she's passionate about patient care, research, academics, and community-based activities. So over to you, Dr. Anjali.
Thank you, Dr. Shilpa, for the kind introduction. So I would start exactly from where Dr. Sanjay Agrawal sir has left, that if we want to prevent complications and if we want to save lives, we need to start very early, much earlier than what we are doing right now. The intervention needs to be done at a very earlier stage to prevent the complications, or I may say so, to prevent the disease itself. And for that, I am touching upon a topic which sounds very vague, but I have tried to specifically take only certain points to be put here and give a message. There's a lot that can be talked about this topic, but this is also not the topic that is very often or commonly spoken about. And the topic is developmental origins of metabolic diseases. Now, I would like to take you through 4 important points. One is, what is developmental origin of health and diseases, and what is fetal origin of health and diseases. Second is, what is development? What are the windows of opportunity during these developmental stages where we can peep in and intervene to change the future? So the current intervention should be able to change the outcome or the future of the disease and its complications. And then we will see whether it needs to be just blamed on the genes or we can do something about it. So before 2005, around 1990s, the concept of fetal origin of adult diseases was put forth by Dr. Bakar. Dr. Yagnik had a very good contribution to that. And there was a concept of saying that there are certain changes in the fetal timings that will have effect on how an adult behaves in terms of health and diseases. In 2005, this term was changed to developmental origin of health and diseases, and it was understood that it is not only during the in utero time or the fetal time, but also in the early age of a person's life, that certain changes, environmental factors or nutritional factors, can affect the way a person behaves in his health and diseases as an adult. So this was changed from fetal origins to developmental origins. Not only that, it also increased the window of opportunities to peep in and intervene. So what is developmental origin of health and disease? What does this concept supposed to mean to us? It is exposure to certain environmental influences during crucial times of development, which might have a significant consequences in individuals' short and long-term health. Now, why this topic may not be of a huge interest, or it may not be spoken with by a lot of people, is because we feel that these factors are non-modifiable. There are genetic changes or there are changes in the developmental times that have happened. Now you can't do anything about this, so why speak about it? But what I would try to highlight here, that these factors may not be non-modifiable, they may be modifiable, because if it was only genes that were getting transferred during the development, then the genes that are transferred from gorilla to us are 98% similar. And the genetic similarity between one human being to other human being, irrespective of the gender of the person, irrespective of the geographical locality of the person, irrespective of the patient's ethnicity, the race, one human being is 99.9% similar in terms of genetic materials when it comes to the transfer of the genetic material from one human being to other human being. Then what does happen which makes us different than gorilla and one human being different from the other human being? Because the component of the transfer of the material from one generation to another generation includes genetics, which is mainly DNA, which are, as we saw, almost as good as gorillas. But what has changed is the exposure or the expression of the gene, which is determined by proteins which are surrounding these genes and are affecting the expression of the gene without changing its biological or structural nature. So the same gene which is present in gorilla or the same gene which is present in some other human being might have a different expression in other human being, and that is decided or influenced by epigenome. And epigenome is affected by a large number of factors, which when I spoke to Dr. Yagnik sir few days back about this topic, who introduced me to this term called as exposome, which is a collective term used for everything that a human being is, or any animal for that matter, is exposed to in a lifetime. So these are the factors which may be nutritional. We have been speaking about how they affect us since morning. It may be exercise, it may be environment, it may be temperature, it may be moisture, it may be mental factors, it may be socio-economical factors, it may be cultural factors, it may be beliefs, it may be regional, religional. So all these factors included composed together and are called as exposomes, which might have a very strong effect on epigenome, which will finally have an effect on how a particular gene is expressed in your lifetime. Now, even though the genes, as we saw, take a long time to change or may change only slightly from one species to another species, the epigenetic changes are modifiable and reversible. So whatever happens in your genetic expression in your lifetime is modifiable. So the developmental exposomes can change, and as the exposome change, the genetics can also change, and genetics may not be straight away considered as a non-modifiable factors. I may risk here of sounding a bit too bold or too optimistic, but I think this will open up a huge window of opportunity for us not to look at the genetics as something which is absolutely non-reversible and non-modifiable. Now let's look at what is development and why it is changed from fetal to developmental origin of health and diseases. So we know the human development from utero to infancy, then early puberty, reproductive years, menopause, and then comes the aging. Now this, as is shown in this slide, is not linear. If we're talking about a developmental origin of health and diseases, we're talking practically about the future. We're talking practically about the future generations. And as we know from the cycle of life, these stages in one person's life may be linear, but if you look at the disease burden or the total humanity, these are cycles. Even though after reproductive years, an individual human being changes the path from the cycle, but we are definitely transferring this material as well as the exposomes to the next generation. And that is why it is important to understand that we are not only affecting the genetic and epigenetic material of a human being's life, but also of the next generation. And that opens up a window of opportunity at every stage that was depicted in the last slide, where we can peep in and look at the future or modify the future. And we are going to look at these topics from a very specific windows. And the most important window is pregnancy. I'm going to look at two models. I'm going to show you two models to just grab this concept and see how we intervention in one person's life can not only change that person's future, but also the next generation's future. So a simple a trial which showed that the birth weight of a child is directly related to the risk of that child developing a heart disease before 65 years of age. And as the birth weight goes down, the risk of heart disease goes up. Now, this was a very old study and done in Western population. What was further revealed to us in Indian studies by Dr. Yagnik was that it's not only birth weight going down, but also birth weight going up that is directly related to what is going to be the risk of heart disease of this particular person when the person grows up. So bottom line is that the birth weight might be one parameter which might be looked at as a factor which might contribute to the risk of chronic disorders that a person might develop in future. Now this was the birth weight model. Another is a hyperglycemia model. You can look at the correlation of level of hyperglycemia that is exposed during the pregnancy and prevalence of diabetes in the children when they grow up. Now, as the exposure to hyperglycemia in utero increases, the person's chances of development, the child's chances of development of diabetes in his future goes up. And that is why these are the two models that I'm saying. There are n number of other things that might be affected, that might be influencing, and each one can be a research in itself. Now, coming to the next point, that female fetus is something which is another one step ahead in terms of intervention, because as you can see, this slide shows that the outcome might be different if the hyperglycemia is mother's exposure or the hyperglycemia is exposed from the father's side. And that again, there are two different cohorts where the child is a man or a child is a male or a female child. Now, as you know, that a female fetus has all the reproductive cells that it will need in her lifetime when the child is born. So when we are talking about a female fetus, there are actually 3 and many more lives that we're talking about, because the child is going to be born with all the reproductive cells that need. So my risk of my profile of health and disease will be decided when I was born, and that would decide on the exposomes that my mother is exposed to, or maybe she is exposed to when she was in her mother's womb. So there are a number of opportunities that we have to change a person's life. So it is never too early and never too late in the developmental origin. It's not that we only need to take care during pregnancy, but pregnancy is a very important window of opportunity to change not only that person's life, but also the lives of everyone which is born to that person and later in life. So pregnancy is one of the very important window. Coming back to another windows, that in the pregnancy, we are going to take care of the mother, we are going to affect the fetus, and then we have, if we are not able to intervene at that point, we have another windows of opportunity. During infancy, we can intervene. We can intervene during early childhood. Yesterday, I was talking to Yagnik sir, who told me that he has results which are not yet published, but they say that the fat percentage of a 6-year-old girl decides whether that girl will be at a higher risk of developing gestational diabetes mellitus when she grows up and is in her reproductive years of life. Now, puberty is another important time where the reproductive cells and the resulting health and diseases can be affected. Prior to pregnancy, another window of opportunity where the maternal weight loss has been shown to improve the fetal outcome. Why only mothers and ladies? Even the paternal exercise and health weight loss has shown to improve the glucose metabolism in the child when he grows up. So there are a number of windows of opportunity. As I said, that hyperglycemia model tells us that the mothers with gestational diabetes mellitus, if they have a controlled weight gain during pregnancy, the risk of future type 2 diabetes in mother is reduced. Lactation is another window of opportunity where the modification in the exposomes can be done. So if we compare these 3 women who never had a child, had 3 children but never breastfed, and had 2 children and breastfed each one of them for 1 year, what do you think who has the highest risk of developing diabetes? Now, there is a study which shows that women who do not breastfeed are at a much higher risk of developing. These are women with GDM who do not breastfeed are at a much higher risk of developing future diabetes compared to women who have breastfed at least for 3 months. So the risk, there is also a study which said that pregnancy itself increases the risk of gestational diabetes mellitus in obese women. And this risk can be mitigated and brought down to the original level when the child is breastfed. So we have a number of windows of opportunity from infancy till the reproductive years of not only modifying a person's health and disease, but also the health and disease of future generations to come. So we have seen what is developmental origin of health and disease and how it has increased the windows of opportunity because we have not restricted it only to the in utero and fetal stages. The development is a continuum. It's never too early, never too late. Never think that this is a non-modifiable factor and never say that it's genes and we can't do anything. There are a number of opportunities during a lifetime to change a person's and the next generation's health and diseases. And if I may say so without sounding too optimistic, genetics should not be considered blindly as a non-modifiable factor because epigenetics can be changed by changing the exposome. With that, I would like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk on this topic. To Neeta Di, Sanjay sir,